While the global economy shows signs of slow growth, U.S. President Donald Trump continues to point to what he sees as a success of his tariff regime.
Toyota is leaving Mexico, and they're going to build one of the biggest car manufacturing plants in the world in Texas. That's because of the tariffs, because we don't mind if you build in Mexico, but if you build in Mexico, you have to pay 25% tariff.
Trump's remarks come as Canada and the U.S. enter a new phase in their trade talks. Exactly 1 week ago, the U.S. administration said it would not extend CUSMA for another 16 years. So, what happens now? Laura Dawson is the executive director of the Canada-U.S. Future Borders Coalition. Laura, always good to see you. It's great to have you here in person this time.
Thanks. Great to be here.
How worried do you think Canadians should be at this point in the CUSMA process, now that the Americans have decided not to renew it? They haven't pulled out of it, but it's kind of in this 10-year zombie state right now. How worried should we be?
I think Canada should continue to be worried. There has not been a huge cataclysmic change over the last 2 weeks, but it's just increasing weight. We're having like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's one thing after the other. Uncertainty is continuing, and it would be really irresponsible to just assume if they haven't pulled the plug now, they're not going to pull the plug. We should just continue business as usual, and eventually it'll be fine. I think that would be a bad idea.
Well, look, business as usual would have been all three partners agree to renew it for another 16 years and then review it again down the road. But this puts us in this weird sort of hybrid situation, right, where it persists for another decade, but there's an annual review, which means America every year can use this economic leverage against Canada and Mexico and keep seeking side letters and side letters and side letters that just undermine the whole principle of the Continental Trade Agreement.
Yeah, and so Canada needs to be continuing to think through a strategy that's in Canada's best economic interest of how to manage these, whether you call them negotiations or review periods, to really be advancing the economic relationship any way it can, and not just sort of be ragging the puck and hoping that this goes away. I think Canada's got great trade negotiators. I think they've been working really hard. Janice Charrette's doing a great job. But there's no playbook for this. Under the NAFTA, under the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we had parameters for how you conduct a negotiation. This is something else entirely, and the responses are not within the framework of a legal trade agreement. We've been seeing these handshake agreements, side letters, and trying to manage those and figure out what's going to ring the bell in the White House to give Canada the kind of certainty and continuity it needs. That's a real guessing game, but I think Canada can figure it out.
Well, there seems to be like tiers of talks happening, right?
Yeah.
Like Janice Charrette and Dominic LeBlanc with Jamieson Greer, and you may disagree with Jamieson Greer, but he's a professional trade negotiator. Yeah. But then when you go up, you get the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, getting involved, and then of course the President, and that's when it gets very political, very transactional, and the leverage just gets really used in a powerful way.
Yeah, I think you start with the levels you know, and the Canadian negotiators and USTR know each other very well. And Jamieson Greer, he knows who he works for, but he is following the rules of global trade. They've been pretty clear on what they're looking for from Canada in terms of online streaming, in terms of dairy, in terms of rules of origin for autos, a couple of other things. And these are all things that I've been led to understand are manageable, are doable. So start with that. Understand that the Section 232s, the steel and aluminum and those other sectors, they're problematic, and we're going to hope we can work our way through. But let's take the impulse from USTR. There's 3 or 4 things that we can work our way through now. Let's work our way through them.
But you know, the Section 232s, the auto sector, steel, copper, aluminum, all of it.
Yeah.
Greer has more or less made it clear he has no authority to negotiate on those. Like, that is the president's decision, and that will be for the president to settle. So you imagine some future point where Mark Carney and Donald Trump have to resolve this. So how do you advance it when, you know, the lead negotiator is very limited on how far he can go, and no matter what you do, dropping the digital services tax, you know, telling the CRTC to reconsider the contributions for the digital streaming giants, spending 4% of GDP on defense now by 2030. There's no credit on it. Like, nothing in the relationship matters except each transaction being a win for the United States.
I agree with that. I've been talking to folks in and around Washington who say, you know, in the old days, we used to be able to say, well, Canada gave us what we wanted on defense, and therefore let's give them a pass on this thing. They would look at the fullness of the relationship. Now, as you say, it's transactional. So if I'm in Janice Charrette's office, I'm putting together 3 buckets. The buckets are, can we deal with the irritants that are identified in the national trade estimates? So those 3 or 4 things we just identified? Can we find legitimate improvements which work for both sides? And we've got that Fortress North America agenda where a couple of things have been identified. So that's a second bucket. And then the third bucket is these wild card items that, as you say, are really managed much more at a political level, could come out of nowhere. I think if you handle those first 2 well, then the third will be less impactful, I hope.
I mean, it all makes sense, but the challenge, I guess, is that on the fundamental nature of the relationship as it exists right now, the way the president talks about other nations, some of it quite uncharitable, if you look at what he's saying in NATO, for example, but you're either a customer, a competitor, or a supplier. Partner is not a word that's used. And I think Canadians, maybe naively, have always viewed this as a bit of a partnership, junior partner, senior partner, but a partnership. And that's just not there now. So this, I guess, is where the diversification, the look to Europe, the look to Asia, factors in heavily. So where do you think it ends up at the end of this process with the tone of it all?
It demands a level of agility and pragmatism that Canada is really being challenged by it. It really involves taking slights and insults and swallowing them and saying, okay, but what's in the economic best interest? There are things that can be done. We know that the president responds to business, but business has been active, but business doesn't want to wave the flag and be in the media. So if we create space for quiet conversations, for levels of influence to move forward, I think that continues to be viable. I think there's members of Congress on both sides that are responsive to Canadian business influence, and certainly in areas like energy, critical minerals, agriculture. Those are really strong areas of Canada-U.S. partnership where we see business being very active.
Well, look, we'll see where Congress is after the midterms, because this is undoubtedly going to stretch beyond that point. But, you know, it's interesting to talk about business. Yes, they're not out launching big campaigns. They did make it clear in the USTR review process that they want NAFTA to be renewed. They want this to persist because it's in everyone's best interest. But then you have the president sort of ignoring a consensus opinion and looking at things like Toyota making a $4 billion expansion in San Antonio, saying, look, it's proof. My tariffs are working, ignoring the other carnage that it's doing throughout the economy. How do you... It's hard to see a rational argument winning, a data-driven argument even, when that's how it seems to be favored.
True. But I think the Prime Minister has been very good at providing those top-level initiatives that the President responds to. He knows how to work with that. And at the same time, hopefully the real work can continue as far as possible at that USTR TN trade negotiator level.
But am I wrong that this could be sort of just the normal, certainly for the rest of the Trump years? Because who knows what happens in the next U.S. election, whether the next president decides they want to, I don't know, leave CUSMA or roll it over and renew it. But if we go into, if this decade process lasts a full decade, it's going to be every year this, and the uncertainty, does it go away? Or does business just move to the U.S.?
I think the question is, does it stay the same or could it get worse? And it could get worse at any moment. Just because the president has not pulled that 6-month withdrawal notification, who's to say that he won't find a reason to do so? And because there are very few constraints on him, whether from Congress or the bureaucracy, that could be a road he goes down. That concerns me. Also concerns me that Mexico is willing to provide the sorts of concessions and offers that Canada can't. And the president would say, well, these guys are our partners, fine. I'm good with the bilateral with them. Canada, forget about it.
Okay, but just as a final point, who knows what he's going to do on the 6th month? Maybe something provokes him to do it. Maybe it's the midterms. Maybe it's a run-up to that. You know, it becomes sort of a moment to extract another political narrative. I mean, would the U.S. business community stay as sort of reluctant if he signals this is all ending and we're leaving the North American Trade Pact? That seems like something that would ignite them. Yeah,
but we're confusing public policy and the public good with shareholder value. So a business that is oriented to stand up on its hind legs and oppose the president would face some very significant challenges from its shareholders, from its, seeing its prices plummet in the stock market. It would be a very unique circumstance that would see that sort of public opposition. So it continues to be working behind the scenes, trying to do what is possible under the circumstances, moving, making quarter measure benefits. It's not optimal, but it's the best we got.
Does it stay the same or does it get worse? What an awful diagnosis. But you're probably not wrong, sadly. Laura Dawson, Executive Director of the Canada-U.S. Future Borders Coalition, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, David.